Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Talktagon. I am one of your co-hosts, Ty O'Keefe, and I will be joined by my esteemed co-host, Craig Allen from the Fight Night Picks podcast. And as always, the Talktagon is brought to you by Dialogue. We use Dialogue because we love the simple platform. It's extremely user-friendly. We're always going to be able to put stuff out fast, and we feel like it's necessary to give fight fans shorter podcasts when we don't have time to listen to hours and hours of rambling when we've got busy lives. To get started, all you got to do is go to dialogue.com and click host a call, and it'll walk you right through. You can broadcast live audio over Twitter and talk about anything you want. It doesn't have to be sports, it can be books, horses, cars, I don't care, anything you want. But anyways, that is dialogue.com. Now, we've had a kind of busy week, despite the fact that there hasn't been any UFC fights and the schedule's a little bit slow these days. But there has been some news worth talking about, and maybe some news that says bigger things about the state of the UFC. One of those is Kamaru Usman being booked as the replacement for Tyron Woodley and Darren Till's title fight in early September. A lot of folks think that, well, Usman is the wrong guy to be putting in that situation. But, you know, it says he is undefeated. And in the bigger picture, it looks like something the UFC is going to continue to do. And there's a lot of issues is why it's happening. But also, with a stacked welterweight division, it seems like guys may be getting cut out of opportunities they deserve. At this point, I would love to hear Craig's opinion on this, because I don't agree with him, but I definitely want to hear his opinion on it. So, Craig, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with the masses. I sent out a tweet earlier on this week, more of a poll, I guess. And the question was, so if this fight between Till and the champ Woodley doesn't materialize, who should step in and fight that party? And so my options were Covington, Usman, or Other. Other got a few votes. Covington got the most, and Usman was left in the dust. And I think that Usman deserves a shot. I mean, if Till or Woodley can't make it, who else would you have in that fight? I mean, Usman's style matches Woodley's quite well. He's a good puncher. He doesn't have as much power, obviously, as Woodley. We all know that, but he still does have that punching ability there. Now, I know he broke a hand, if not both hands, when he fought Damian Maia, but he's got superior wrestling, obviously above and beyond Darren Till. I mean, there'd still be a size gap, but not that big. And I mean, like you had mentioned, I mean, he's got a really good record. If you look down through the welterweight division, if not Usman, then who?
You see, and I hear what you're saying, but as far as I'm concerned, yeah, he's beat Damian Maia. But besides that, he really doesn't have any big victories. And we can't be giving a guy like Usman this opportunity just because he matches up well with one of the two guys in the title fight.
So he's ranked 6th in the division.
No,
so
I know, but
if not him, are you going to give Dos Anjos on a loss?
Santiago, might as well give it to Ponzinibbio.
Who's ranked 10th.
Ponzinibbio, yeah, exactly, because he's done more than Usman has in the UFC. He's red hot. He's won how many in a row? And honestly, he may not, be a top 5 guy or a top 6 guy like Usman, but he's done way more in the octagon, and he is deadly. He would match up well with Woodley, even though, again, I don't think we should make this decision based on who matches up well with who. But I think if we're going to go say something as insane as Usman is qualified for this opportunity, then Ponzinibbio is more qualified. And at the same time, Colby Covington had his welterweight belt stripped. Okay, now as much as some people might not like Colby Covington, unfortunately, that kind of is makes him the person who should have had this backup role, just because he was the interim champ, had it stripped. So you would think that he would have been the answer instead of Usman, which makes zero sense to me. Maybe it's a sign that the UFC is a little tired of Colby Covington too.
I don't think now. When I was on Twitter and I was trying to defend my pick of Usman, I mean, it's just a replacement. So, I mean...
Yeah, it was a replacement for a title fight.
Yeah, well, I mean, if Usman fights Till, is that for an interim title? Because, I mean, on the website, it still says that Covington's interim champ. So, I don't know what that fight means. But you talked about Santiago Ponzinibbio's record. And, I mean, he's fought in the UFC with losses to LaFleur and Lorenz Larkin, got knocked out by Larkin. Since then, he's beaten guys like Court McGee, Zach Cummins, Nordine Taleb, Gunnar Nelson, and Mike Perry. But that was in 2017 that he won, 3 fights. He hasn't fought since. But Kamaru Usman's won 2 fights this year against Emil Mek and Damian Maia, who are top opponents.
Yeah, and I agree. I guess I'm more saying that to me, it's just crazy alone that Usman is a guy. And if we're going to get crazy, might as well give it to a guy who has also done a ton of stuff in the UFC and deserves an opportunity. I think Ponzinibbio is that guy. But it's funny that we're in this situation too, because this is a very deep welterweight division.
Yeah.
Like it shouldn't be like this.
And it's funny that you say that, because I mean, we're talking about the rankings, and I don't know if you're looking at the rankings as well as I am, but Jorge Masvidal ranked 9th. When was the last time we saw Jorge Masvidal fight? Like, we're looking at.
Yeah, and the thing is, so many people have beat him.
Yeah, and Gunnar Nelson.
I don't understand that.
Gunnar Nelson's last fight was against Ponzinibbio when he lost. He hasn't fought since. Yeah. And Stun Gun, geez, when was his last fight?
I have no idea. I'm not sure.
I mean,
that's a good point. I mean, you're right. It's just Gunnar Nelson's been out of the picture ever since that loss he suffered. Was it to Ponzinibbio? Yeah. And he's been out of the picture for, ever. His striking has not progressed as people had hoped it would.
Yeah.
And he's paying for it in terms of not getting the type of fights he probably deserves. So we can't call on a guy like RDA, because RDA gets injured all the time. We don't know what his health situation is in terms long-term, short-term. He's not as dependable. He's definitely not a dependable backup at this point. Stephen Thompson's still banged up, isn't he, from the Till fight?
Yeah, I think he break a hand as well.
What about Robbie Lawler?
Robbie Lawler hasn't fought since UFC on Fox in Winnipeg.
When he beat, where did he lose? I'm trying to think
that fight.
And a lot of Robbie Lawler, that was his first fight too, I think, after losing the belt. And I was very interested to see how he would bounce back.
Lost RDA, beat Donald Cerrone.
Yeah, that's it. Yep.
And I mean, we're talking rankings, like you had mentioned. Colby Covington makes the most sense for this fight. If Till or if Woodley can't make it, Covington makes the most sense. So we're talking top to bottom. Covington's number 1. Dong Hyun Kim, who we were wondering who he fought last. He last fought Colby Covington, and that was UFC from Singapore in June of 2017. Right. And I mean, we look at other divisions. Let's look at the featherweight division. I mean, we talked about it a little bit, I believe, in the last episode. But everyone in that division, on any given day, could end up fighting Max Holloway, and who knows what could happen. I mean, Zabit Magomed is 15, but in welterweight, Stun Gun's 15.
But to your point about Usman beating Ponzinibbio falling early in his career, and that's why Usman is more deserving of the welterweight backup role. Max Holloway slipped a couple times early too, and it wasn't all just to Conor McGregor. And look how he's progressed. Ponzinibbio could bounce back just the same type of way and roll up those rankings. So it's not fair to just say Ponzinibbio, he's had those early problems and early losses that automatically disqualifies him for this type of role.
He's sitting at 26-3. He's got a great record, and I mean, he's won what? Oh, yeah. He's won 3 fights in a row, and especially Taleb, Cummins, Court McGee, Gunnar Nelson, Mike Perry. But that Perry win was the same card as Lawler RDA, and I mean, December 2017. It's since Kamaru Usman's won 2 fights. So just based on activity alone, I mean, I would want to see Usman take this fight.
We know the UFC doesn't base that though. They don't seem to care about how active or inactive. Obviously, as we saw with the Nate Diaz Poirier
Lesnar
matchup, or the Lesnar, that's a whole other episode. But there's a lot. The thing is, it's not a shallow division, and they're not short on options. But it bothers me overall because it says it's a symptom of this extreme weight cutting, and when guys are trying to get this advantage. Fighting at a lower weight because they're going to be more powerful, and then they spend the last 24 hours carb loading and getting as much weight back as they can. And 2 welterweights step into the octagon the day after weigh-ins, weighing $185 or whatever, or 180 pounds, significantly over the welterweight limit, and it's no big deal, whatever. I think that in order to straighten these things out and to get these divisions headed in the right direction, UFC needs to put their foot down with USADA as well. And say, look, you cannot cut a certain percent of weight. Darren Till, as great as he is, he should not be allowed to fight at welterweight. He is a middleweight, and even if he fights at welterweight, how much longer is this going to last? He's a young guy, and as he gets older, cutting that weight is going to be even harder. And you think he's getting trouble now? You think he's going to have so much trouble down the road trying to drop that weight when his metabolism's slower and he's in his 30s? I mean, come on.
I mean, I think the whole Darren Till plan is win the welterweight title and then just leave and go to middleweight. Or if middleweight doesn't work out, just move up to light heavyweight. I mean, he looks like he walks around. I'm pretty sure he does walk around over 200 pounds. So,
he's a big guy.
Yeah, I mean, that's what kind of makes sense to me. But a lot of the fighters in that welterweight division, I mean, look at number 14, Alex Oliveira. He's a big guy fighting a welterweight. But there's all sorts of Ponzinibbio, Usman, majority of them.
This nonsense about getting a 165 division, it to me just waters it down, and it'll take MMA down the same path of doom that boxing went down.
Because, I disagree there. I think it's a good
waters
move.
It down.
I think if yes and no. I think if you get rid of the welterweight division completely, and then you have a 165 and you have a 175, you have a 185.
Okay, so you're saying get rid of the division. I'm hearing more people saying they want to add it and get rid of nothing.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of weird ones. I saw another one today where somebody wanted to get rid of welterweight, and so they wanted 165, 175, 185, 195. And then instead of
no way, that's too much.
Yeah, and instead of light heavyweight, they get rid of that. So from 195, then 215. But to me, it makes more sense to have that cruiserweight at 225. There's a lot of guys like we've seen lately that could either go up or go down a little bit. I mean, we've seen
it would split the heavyweights in half.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what makes sense to me, but it doesn't really matter what makes sense to me. I mean,
well, the thing is, it just, boxing was America's favorite spectator sport for decades for a reason, besides with baseball, obviously. And when it was what it was, there wasn't the WBO, the IBC, 88 other organizations that are holding belts and multiple divisions. We had, I don't know, a few years ago, if you saw that Super 6, the super middleweight tournament with boxing, things like that. They're cutting guys down into these tiny little subdivisions. And it just doesn't seem like it's done anything for boxing that's good. Because the more belts there are, the less significance they have, right?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I've noticed with boxing, and one of the things that people bring up about, MMA, and I saw Chael Sonnen and Ariel Helwani talking about it on their show, was that, will the UFC, will MMA fighters, will they ever get a union? But I mean, on the opposite end of that, I also saw a tweet come out today that there are about 8 or more boxing fighters this year that have made over $1 million without pay-per-view bonuses. So, I mean, boxing still has a home, and there's still a lot of people that watch it.
It blows my mind, though, when you look at the whole spectrum of combat sports, you can clearly see that the UFC is the most popular thing. Yet boxing continues to come up with these huge purses, these huge paydays, these huge events, and it just goes to show how much power that sport still has.
Yeah.
It just, I don't know. I guess I'm a purist. I like the way, I think a lot of the success that the UFC has had is because they have simplified the whole divisional structure. They kept 4 or 5 divisions for the men, as many as they can for the women, and just kind of, left it. And I think that's a huge, huge attraction. I do not think, it's if that's the alternative, if it's between making more divisions or telling people to stop, you cannot cut X amount of weight anymore, I pick stop cutting X amount of weight, because it endangers the fighters. It puts them in a position where their health is at risk. And look how many cancellations we've had for main events and big fights because of weight cutting. And Max Holloway was out of it when he got called in to fight Khabib. I mean, he couldn't even function. We've seen him on TV a million times. And that interview he was completely out of it. That's a world-class athlete. And we're telling these guys it's okay to do that 24 hours before you go into what's probably the biggest fight of your career. I mean, there's some really messed up thinking in that line. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and anyways, I mean, we're on the Talktagon. We're talking UFC, and we had alluded to this. I believe it was on our last episode when I had talked about another poll. I don't do too many, but it's good to get the information. And we had talked about bringing in an atomweight division into women's MMA in the UFC. And
that was last episode.
Yeah, we both thought, it could be a good idea, more championship, more eyeballs. And we had pointed to Southeast Asia, where, I mean, that's one of their biggest divisions in MMA.
Absolutely.
And there's so much buzz around it. But another thing about Southeast Asian MMA and some of the organizations and promotions over there, where they instituted hydration testing, And they also weigh fighters multiple times before the fight to make sure that they're fighting within their weight class. And they've seen a dramatic shift in weight cutting and a lot less fights being canceled. So I think the UFC could really take a look at, what they're doing and learn from it. And then you'd see guys like Darren Till, among others, hopping up a weight class.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. Obviously the atomweight isn't ever going to be it's never going to be a male division. But when we're having trouble stacking the women's featherweight division with just people, we're trying to get bodies in there just to fight. And, and it definitely seems like it would be a smart, not only for the UFC to start an atomweight division to bring more female stars into mainstream MMA. But as you said, I mean, the technology they have over there, it could really, really pay off big in terms of weight cutting and hydration testing and all those things. And it would also make the UFC far more global. And I know it's a very global organization, but it really would. I mean, they would have their foot down in a huge market in Southeast Asia or Asia all over the place. I mean, oh man.
It's been strange. It's been strange that they haven't tried to make a bigger push in Southeast Asia. I know they've had 2 Singapore cards in the last, I don't know, year and a half, 18 months, what have you. And they've been successful and they've had a lot of good fights. I mean, we've seen fighters come over like a Peter Yan who can't even find a fight for UFC Moscow now that his opponent's been knocked out of that fight. So it'll be interesting to see. But they haven't really been making a big global push where we've seen other, international promotions doing the opposite and making a big push.
Well, I don't know. It's one of those things you kind of wonder because Dana White, remember, there's one time he said women would never fight in the UFC. So, we can trust what he says as far as we can throw him at this point. And that's okay. He's a business guy. He can do what he wants. But I just don't think more divisions outside of like adding a female atomweight division. I just don't think it's the answer. I think the answer is the hard truth. The answer is facing this, looking right in the dead eye of these guys cutting weight and say, look, you're killing yourself, man. You're hurting yourself. You're putting yourself at risk after you train day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out. You're killing yourself to train to get these fights. And then right before you do it, you're depleting your body of everything to get an advantage that both fighters are trying to get. And when you really think about it, when both fighters are trying to get the same advantage by cutting weight, what's the advantage? They kind of cancel each other out in a way. Because if both fighters are cutting, significant amount of weight, they're both going to have the same advantage. It doesn't make any sense. It might as well be a middleweight fighter. It's just frustrating. And pretty soon, one of these days, we're going to see. You know what it'll take, right? It'll take a UFC or a Bellator fighter dying, and that's horrible. That's horrible. It will take the death of a UFC or a Bellator fighter from weight cutting to change this.
To bring this almost full circle, I believe, in recent memory, the last time I saw the UFC doing this, bringing somebody in, it was for the middleweight division when you saw Thiago Santos weighing in for the Ultimate Fighter season 28 finale between Adesanya and Tavares. And I was really surprised to see him hop on the scale. But this seems to be, something that they're looking not forward to, but something they're looking ahead to, hedging their bets a little bit. I know you'll see a card every now and again where, let's say Till and Woodley are on the card, and I'm going to look through the rankings. Geez, Stephen Thompson fights Robbie Lawler, and then the top guy or the highest ranked guy ends up fighting if one of those two in the main event drops out. That's what they used to do in the past, but then that leaves one guy in a bad spot. So, I mean, Usman talked about it on the MMA Hour this week, and he said, obviously I'm not going to get a full fight purse. If the fight doesn't materialize or if I don't have to fight, they're not going to pay me for it. I'm not going to get pay-per-view points, and that makes a lot of sense. But I mean, in the purest sense, Kamaru Usman in that top 10 or top 15, 2 fights in 2018, 2 wins. And if you look at the rest of them, Lawler, Thompson, Dos Anjos, all coming off losses, and Maia behind him with a loss, it makes the most sense to have Usman in this spot.
And to me, though, and I do agree to some extent what you're saying, but to me, it's ridiculous because at the end of the day, if one of them doesn't fight and Usman fights and then he wins the title, we're going to have Usman as the welterweight champion.
I'm all right with that.
He does not deserve that right now. He's not there. There are so many more deserving guys than him to have that opportunity. However, I could be proven wrong. It's just my opinion. I just think any scenario that ends up with Usman as a champion within the next few months, when we're talking about one of the deepest divisions in the UFC, is just insane. It's just insane. I don't get it. I really don't. But anyways, I know you had some other things you'd like to to bring up? You were saying with the rankings and some other things.
Yeah, I mean, one of the neat things that I've been, looking over on Twitter past day or two, at the big press conference, Khabib and Conor, it's going to happen. They also announced that Glover Teixeira and Jimmy Mano are going to fight in Sao Paulo, Brazil, coming up later on this year. And I mean, that on paper would be a good fight. I mean, Jimmy Mano, a really good boxer, got into MMA kind of later stages of, most people's careers. And Glover Teixeira on a little bit of a decline. So it'd be interesting to see a fight between those two. But Glover Teixeira ended up pulling out of the fight. So Mano was looking for a replacement. It came out today. Guilherme Cruz ended up saying that Polyana Viana wouldn't take a main event spot. So she's fighting Tanya Evinger in the co-main. Viana said, no, I'm training for a 3-round fight, which I had a bit of a back and forth with some people on Twitter. I thought it was pretty surprising. I would assume that moving from co-main to main event, you actually would make more money. But she had been training.
So much about name recognition, though, right?
Yeah. And I mean, you're fighting in your home country would be great. I think Polyana Viana, actually, she's a really special talent at bantamweight. So nobody should be overlooking her, but she didn't want to take the fight going from 3 to 5. She's been training for 3. Cardio is good for 3. So we're still looking for a replacement for the main event there. And it was Anthony Smith that came out and said, hey, I'll fight Jimmy Mano. I don't care. And so he had a bit of a back and forth. Then he had a bit of a back and forth with Volkan Oezdemir, who's supposed to be his opponent at UFC Moncton in October. So it'll be interesting to see what the UFC decides to do in the light heavyweight division there.
Yeah, it's kind of ever since John Jones has been gone, even with Cormier at the top, it's kind of just been like everybody's kind of free falling. There's no real, like, Alexander Gustafsson should have had a shot against Cormier's, another shot. And he's been nowhere in terms of big, huge fights lately. And that division definitely needs some stability. And when Cormier leaves, you got to wonder who's going to lead that division. The light heavyweights.
I would assume Alexander Gustafsson. I mean, he's one of the more exciting fighters to watch. If you go out and watch his last fight, which was long ago against Glover Teixeira, he threw like a 4 or 5 punch combo. It was absolutely insane. It should be on everybody's highlight reel. But I mean, if we're looking at this division, I'm trying to think in my mind who has fights already. I mean, Corey Anderson beat Glover. OSP is ranked 7. Would he want to fight 8-ranked Glover Teixeira? I don't think so.
And you're always going to fight forward, they always say, but I don't know. The rankings are so suspect these days. I don't know if that applies anymore.
I mean, does Tyson Pedro off a loss at 14 fight Teixeira at 8? Like, it's tough. I mean, and you got Ilir Latifi near the top 2. Does he take a fight? It's going to be tough. I mean, Anthony Smith, he's pretty good at calling a shot, and he's ranked 9th right now. So
and after doing what he did his last time out, Anthony Smith is a very popular light heavyweight.
Yeah, I think a fight with Glover Teixeira, I mean, that would really raise the stock.
Stylistically, it could be excellent. I mean, they're both heavy hitters.
Yeah, but
that could be one hell of a matchup.
I'll tell you the one thing that people forget about on Twitter and everywhere else, I mean, I like Anthony Smith. I'm excited to see him in Moncton in person. And I really think, he's got a really good game plan right now, but he did get knocked out by Thiago Santos in the middleweight division, and everybody just looks over that.
Well, but as I said with the Max Holloway and other people, there are guys who faltered at different points in their career.
Yes and no. I mean, Max Holloway was closer to the start of his career. Anthony Smith, people will say, he's not a journeyman, but he's 30-13. He's had a lot of fights. So, I mean, a knockout like that
Good
late
point.
in his career, it's kind of, you wonder. And I mean, with the wins he's had, Rashad Evans, Shogun Hua, I mean, a strong gust of wind could knock those guys out. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't value that win he had over Rashad Evans at all. Rashad Evans is so far past his prime. He did himself a favor by retiring, and I even think he should have been in that fight. So, there's going to be a lot of there's going to have to be 2 or 3 guys in the light heavyweight division that mount 2 or 3 wins in a row, mount a charge towards the top of the division, and battle it out. Yeah. Ideally, I think for the UFC, it would be Gustafsson and Anthony Smith and some other dark horse we haven't heard of yet, or that hasn't identified themselves as a top 5 guy yet.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that the back and forth that I've had on Twitter, I've thrown out the possibility that you go out and sign, talent from elsewhere. I mean, the UFC obviously signed that deal with M1 Global to develop talent in Russia, so that's a possibility there. And that's a really talent-rich light heavyweight area of the world.
Yeah.
There's been talk of Nikita Krylov coming back as well and fighting at UFC Moscow. So I guess we'll just have to see what happens.
In terms of the Conor Khabib situation, do you think that the UFC will have a backup for that fight and keep it under wraps?
Yeah, Tony Ferguson.
But is he really? Do they really? How can they depend on him after what he's done? I mean,
Yeah, but it was more Khabib when Khabib and Tony were supposed to fight all those different times. It was
it
more
was two
Khabib's
times
fault.
each, wasn't it? They both
Yeah,
pulled out twice.
I mean, Ferguson, I've never seen somebody recover from a major injury that quick. I mean, he's not a teenager. Like
Yep.
it's mind-boggling that he recovered from such a bad knee injury, and now he's back to training. He looks like he's given it his all, and all of
Do
his
you think
Instagram.
he's going to be ready by September?
Early October, late September. What are we now? August? Yeah.
I mean, because when's Conor Khabib again? October or September?
October. It's early October. I think it's the 6th. 5th.
Yeah, it is the 6th. Yeah, you're right.
So,
I'm so out of it after being away.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm actually going to be away that weekend, but I'll be live tweeting. You'll have a show. It'll be all covered. But
oh yeah, we'll have lots of content covering that. We can. It's like there's no way to not cover that.
No, exactly. But I think
the UFC. Go ahead.
I mean, to your question, if Tony Ferguson can get back that quick, if not Tony Ferguson, you would have to think Dustin Poirier's got to be in the wings ready.
Yeah, now that he beat Alvarez so decisively. Yeah,
exactly.
You're right. That's dead on. And the thing is, though, at the end of the day, we both know that if Conor Khabib doesn't happen, millions of people are going to be so disappointed.
Yeah.
And the UFC does not want that to happen. That'll be UFC will take a serious hit on that because it's not just Khabib Tony. Conor McGregor hasn't fought since November of 2016, which is ridiculous in itself. And he needs to come back and establish himself. And you kind of wonder, Conor, should he be taking a warm-up fight, a tune-up fight before stepping in with Khabib? Because Khabib fought Iaquinta, and he wasn't super active the last year or so. But he beat Iaquinta, so he's been in the octagon, got knocked off that rust, and he's performing well. But McGregor hasn't even stepped in an octagon.
But then, so you want Conor McGregor to get a warm-up fight, and I agree with you. I think it should happen.
But, whatever, warm-up, tune-up, yeah.
But I mean, they throw him back in the rankings at number 1, which is laughable. So Conor McGregor ranked number 1 contender. Who do you give him as a tune-up? Michael Chiesa, who can't make weight? Like, do you have him fight Nate Diaz again? I mean, his cardio suspect already. He could lose that fight. And then
I don't think Diaz is the answer there. And
Iaquinta, he could probably win that fight. Justin Gaethje's already got one booked. Edson Barboza, that doesn't make sense. Yeah.
I like to see.
If you're Iaquinta, you're padding your bank account fighting Khabib and Conor McGregor.
Yeah, hey, Al's a businessman, so there's no problem with that. And he'll take the fight.
I mean, I think we're on the subject, but I think the fight to make in the lightweight division, regardless of Khabib and Conor, is I want to see a rematch between Kevin Lee and Tony Ferguson.
Oh, and okay, I guess I respect that, but when Kevin Lee got that interim title shot last year, he did not deserve. You cannot just rack up wins over middle tier competition and automatically get an interim title shot. You have to beat bigger guys, bigger name people, and more established fighters. Now, Kevin Lee, I'll never believe that he deserved that interim title shot last fall.
Yeah, I mean, since
what has he done since?
Since he's been in the UFC, he's beaten John Tuck, Michael Prazeres.
No, wait. What has he done since that interim title fight?
Beat the piss out of Edson Barboza in a 5-round TKO where he just totally outmuscled him, totally outstruck him, like ruined Edson Barboza.
Well, that's not nothing.
Yeah, I mean, so he's got that fight. I mean, the Chiesa fight before Tony Ferguson, he won in the first round and choked him out. And I don't care if somebody wants to come at me and say, oh, that was a suspect submission. No, it wasn't. Chiesa was going to be out regardless of what the referee decided.
And, Chiesa, you could feed Chiesa to Conor if you wanted, because the fact is that
but he can't make weight.
Beef. They have if he could make the weight. Because they have this beef, where he is dead set on the fact that McGregor prevented him from fighting and cost him all this money, and his lawyers are taking legal action. That's one hell of a storyline to go into it. Now you're sitting in the octagon with the guy who ruined your life, apparently. And I think there would be an audience for that. And it would be about, again, like you said, though, can Chiesa make weight? And the fact that we even have to question that drives me crazy. Like this is what all these fights have turned into, it seems like. There's always, okay, that would be a good matchup. This would be a good matchup. Oh, great to see those guys fight. But can this guy make weight? Can that? Oh, God. It's ruining MMA. It really is. These guys, they need to put their foot down, like I said a couple minutes ago, and just be done with this extreme weight cutting. And as I said a few minutes ago, it's going to take the death of a UFC or a Bellator fighter for it to stop. And that's horrible that it's going to have to go that far. But, I mean, this is ridiculous. After that video Cyborg came out a few years ago of her extreme weight cutting, that should have been enough right there.
Yeah, you know I mean? We've seen it in other promotions where they've created divisions, and there's one of these fighters fighting tonight at 155 in the women's division. I mean, they're creating a division around her, and they're not worrying so much about weight cutting. But I mean, even with Cyborg 145, she definitely has to make a big cut. I mean, I'm glad that we don't have to see her competing in bantamweight, because I think that would take way too much out of her, and it doesn't make sense. But
she can't make it. She's tried so much. She can't make 135. It's impossible.
No, so it'll be interesting with this new season of The Ultimate Fighter, where it's men's heavyweights and women's featherweights, whether or not some of these women are moving up from bantamweight. Some of them are actual featherweights. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of the season.
Well, I agree, and whether we like it or not, she is going to continue to guide women's MMA until she retires.
Yep.
You know what I mean? She'll continue to be the template, right, for success. And we're lucky to see her in the UFC after everything that's happened, really. I mean, it's too bad we can't get her enough opponents, though.
Yeah, I mean,
she's definitely not active enough.
It was funny that you mentioned that, because I talked with Heather Hardy this week, and the question was, will she fight Amanda Nunes this year? Which she thinks, yeah, that'll happen, but going into next year, I think she's going to bolt. I understand she's a UFC contract and you have to live up to it, whatnot. But Conor McGregor had a UFC contract too, and he ended up fighting in boxing. So I think we're going to see Cyborg make a boxing foray next year against an undefeated, multi-division, multi-promotional champ in boxing. Yeah.
Well, with that, I think we will close the book on episode 5 of the Talktagon. Just a quick reminder: this call is brought to you by Dialogue. To get started, just go to dialogue.com, click host a call, and you can talk about anything you want over live audio, a live audio talk radio over social media via Twitter. Well, anything you want to do. It's a very user-friendly platform, and it's a great way to find other people with the same interests and things like that. I'd like to thank my co-host, Craig Allen of the Fight Night Picks podcast. You can find him on Twitter at Craig Allen FNP. Also look out for his podcast. There's a Twitter account for the Fight Night Picks podcast. He's putting out unbelievable content, including a great interview with Heather Hardy recently, with some Josh Emmett, guys like that, John McDessie. And also you can catch my stuff on Fansided MMA and the Fight Network. And you can hit me up on Twitter at Above the Fold Ty. And obviously you can hit me up on Facebook as well as Craig. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us. Thank you very much, Craig.
Thank you, sir,
for coming in, and we will hit you soon with another episode of the Talktagon.